Sumita ma'am.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are. So Sumita ma'am, can
Okay.
we start? Are we good to go?
Yes, Radhika madam. We can start.
All right. So once again, a very good morning to my dear colleagues and good afternoon to the today's eminent speaker to this interactive session on research. So to give a brief background of this interactive session, let me just quickly share this. Ma'am, we are really very happy to share with you that School of Management UG had organized a self-learning FDP for the faculty members which is offered by James Cook University, Australia, Center for International Trade and Business in Asia. So the main purpose behind it was to inculcate the research culture among the faculty members and to help faculty members in their ongoing research. So wherein during this FDP, faculties have gone through all the videos which are there offered as a video sessions by the James Cook University. So, wherein faculties have already learned how to write a persuasive literature review, the research design, qualitative data analysis, and a case study as a research methodology. So, faculty members are already aware that out of these two videos are already edited by our today's guest speaker. So, let me this before we start with this interaction, let me take this opportunity to introduce all with our today's guest speaker. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our today's as our speaker today, who is an associate professor of economic expert member at Academic Board James Cook University. She is she Hello. She is currently the Australia Director Center for International Trade and Business in Asia, that is CITBA, at James Cook University, where she is also an associate professor in the College of Business, Law, and Governance. I am profusely overjoyed to share with you all the expertise she holds in systematic modeling and dynamic relationships between economic, environmental, and social variables. Her research attitude is holistic and inspired by issues in climatic changes and natural disasters and their impact on different economic variables. With amazement, I would also like to share with you all that since 2011, she has been collaborating in several external and internal research projects which are exceeding more than $1 million in value with responsibilities from principal investigator to coordinator of analysis. Furthermore, since 2009, she also produced 41 plus HERDC publications on an average 4 per year. I'm very opportune to notify that ma'am's strength lies in leadership, budgets, strategic decisions, sustainability studies, economics, econometrics, economic modeling, financial markets, environment, and urban economics. She has been honored and awarded with visiting schools to the CEPN at University of Paris in 2013, Faculty Citation Award in 2012, highly commended Top Eco Learning and Teaching Award 2018, and many more. With, with that being said, with great honor, I introduce Dr. Taha Chaiechi, ma'am, to this beautiful morning. Let us take this opportunity to give a warm welcome by giving huge round of applause to ma'am. Welcome you, ma'am, to the MIT World Peace University's this interactive session.
Very
Yes,
much.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yes,
Thank you
thank
very
you
much,
so much, ma'am.
Professor. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you, Professor Molai. Thank you for that very generous introduction. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for inviting me to be
yes,
here
yes,
today. Very delighted to hear that the videos that we put up on our center website has been useful to you and your faculty members. I am over the moon to hear that there has been additional like extra interest in unpacking some of those issues that we discussed and some of the other new issues that you'd like me to talk about. So this is very rewarding. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I want to just say that today's talk is really a conversation. It's not supposed to be a presentation. So I want to remove myself from the formality of a presentation or giving a seminar. Please, by all means, you can interject at any time because this is like a Q&A. I have received some questions beforehand, which I really appreciate. Thank you for sending those questions days before. So that allowed me to sit down and start thinking that if there are certain themes that I can talk about, and I know our time is limited, so we can leave some of the questions for future, but we can focus on a few good number of those questions today. But again, it's really like a conversation session today. So please do stop me and ask a question at any time. I don't promise I will have all the answers for you because there are so many good questions, but diverse questions that have been raised, and I'll do my best to answer them. But if I can't answer something today, I will definitely get back to you on it later. So that's my promise. All right, so I went through like about 10 or 12 questions and kind of started categorizing them into questions that they were kind of sharing a common trend, but there were a couple of standalone questions. And the one that actually I thought I better to start today's conversation with is the one that is in front of you. What is academic writing? Now, that's a very important and critical question for all of us. And as you know, my background is economics, so I'm not a language expert. I cannot be really teaching a lot of things about how to write academically, but I can share what I follow in my academic writing. First of all, one thing that we should remember is that academic writing is different from academics talking. So us academics, we sit next together, have a cup of coffee, have business lunches, have meetings, and we always exchange intellectual ideas. But what we say is completely different with what we write, because when you start focusing on the domain of academic writing, suddenly the way that we write has to change. So in a nutshell, academic writing is formal. So we have to follow formal structures of any kind of writing in any kind of disciplinary areas. More than often, academic writing is objective. That means there should be a question that we want to answer. Otherwise, why do we write? So a research question, a research hypothesis, or something that we want to get to the bottom of it. So it should be objective, and more than often is technical. Why it is technical? Because academic writing is usually evolving around research methodologies of different types. So we use some techniques and methods to refer to evidence, to do analysis and all that. So these three characteristics are very important. And also we write specific things for a specific group of people. So economists, for example, academic writing in economics is for economists. We don't expect nuclear scientists to make a lot of sense of an economic writing. Or we don't expect an economist to make a lot of sense of academic writing in the field of medicine. So each of us, we use our own expert terminologies and phrases in the field, and our audience are specific to us. So we don't write for laymen. Sometimes we have to, because that's when academics engage with the community. So we have to write more generally. But when we write for publications, particularly in journals, we have to follow very formal structure. Now, so what do we do? How do we follow the right rules of academic writing? I I have borrowed 10 rules that is been offered in EAP Foundation. It's a kind of international foundation around literature and writing. And I will share this link, of course, after the presentation with you. You can go and explore the website. There are 10 rules, and lots of universities, I actually have seen that they follow these 10 rules as benchmark for academic writing. So let's see, what do they say? Use formal vocabulary. Yes, okay, so we just said academic writing is formal. We don't use casual and conversational sort of languages in our academic writing. Use formal verbs. Again, similarly. So we use formal verbs. So for example, if there are verbs that are like 2 words, like set up, it's recommended to use a one word verb for it. So instead of saying set up, we can say establish. So you see, suddenly set up, which is a more conversational kind of verb, becomes established. So it's like formal. Or if you want to say something goes down, instead of saying goes down, you can say decrease. So again, not only formal, but also try to use one word verbs rather than 2 words. Use full verbs. So for example, in conversation, we say we couldn't, or that wouldn't happen. In writing, you don't say wouldn't or couldn't, you say would not or could not, right? So use also full verbs. Formal grammar structure, that is a whole another area that I'm not going to really bore you with, but basically in terms of grammar, you have to be using appropriate grammar structure. The phrases that you use should be chosen carefully. Some academics used to write a lot of complex sentences, and nothing is wrong with complex sentences, but in so many journals, when the feedback comes back, you can see that the referees are asking you to use simpler structure, but that doesn't mean that you're not using a formal structure. So that's a lot. I mean, the whole 2 hours can be spent on that one rule, a formal grammar structure. Use impersonal language. That is one thing that we get to see a lot happening by PhD students. For example, they start referring to themselves in their academic writing. They say, I tend to do this, or we did that. So the rule of academic writing is not to use those words. So instead of saying I or we, you can say the researchers or this study. So do not make it personal when you're writing academically. Be precise, be very absolutely clear, because if anything, academic writing is all about being clear and detailed. So anything that you say, it has to be exact, detailed, and accurate. Use a statement. You might have seen, and like every day, you may open a newspaper and see a big catchy phrase is used in newspapers, online or on paper. Or sometimes these catchy phrases are like in a kind of a rhetorical questions. So there is a rule around academic writing and saying that, do not use rhetorical questions. The rhetorical questions are those questions that we actually don't want an answer for them, but we just use them for impact, right? So wouldn't it be nice to have vaccine tomorrow? Or is vaccine for coronavirus really 90% effective? Things like that. Don't use those rhetorical questions in academic writing. Use very clear statements. Because again, there should be a difference between journalism and academic writing. Of course, use reference and evidence. And that rule is so important, Rule 8. If we don't use references and do not offer evidence, we will not be doing, we're not writing academically. Was there any question? No? Use hedging statement. Now, this is again another important rule, and I'm going to explain what do they mean by hedging a statement. Imagine, especially with social sciences and business sciences, marketing, management, HR, you name it, all those business fields and sociology, and all those fields that they're dealing with human behavior or even with environment and biophysical environments. Remember, you may have a question which you use data for and then run some analysis to come up with some results. Remember, if another researcher uses the same question, but in a different setup, right? If they use it with different data or different environment, they may come up with a different answer. Same question, maybe even same methodology, but because different data, maybe different cultures, different people. So the same research question may result in different answers, especially in social sciences. It's not like a physical science where we say the water boils at 100 degrees. The water boils always at 100 degrees as long as you're on planet Earth. So that's not debatable. But when it comes to issues with society and people and unpredictability and uncertainty, remember that your results are not the only result out there. So when the rule says use hedging statement means do not use absolute statement. Do not say that, for example, financial development are definitely going to improve national investment levels. I'm just putting some economic spin to it, right? Because you tested it in a certain country, in a certain circumstances, and that was a positive relationship. Do not use an absolute statement to say that relationship is always correct, because somebody else in some other country may have a less developed financial market or less developed investment foundation. So it may not work in that setup. So instead of using absolute statement, use hedging statement. You can say it is possible, okay, or it may lead to, or it appears that. So do not be absolute, even though when you are very clear and precise with your data and analysis and everything, when you are concluding, try to use more hedging statement rather than absolute statement. And also the last one is talking about using transition words. And that's, again, to my experience, it's one of the problems that we see a lot in academic writing, especially, for example, when we're marking PhD thesis, or we are reviewing a paper for a journal or a book. We see that the material, the content is very solid. But for example, something has been really discussed very interestingly in one paragraph, and the next paragraph starts on a different completely note. It's a big jump from one paragraph to another paragraph, or sometimes a big jump from one sentence to another sentence. Now, as a writer, that makes sense to us. Like sometimes we know exactly what we're writing because, yeah, in your head, everything is interconnected. But remember, for a reader, that's not the case. So we have to establish that kind of dot connector, right? So use transition words. So you can say, in addition to that, or building on that argument, or in contrast, always try to say something that one paragraph is somewhat becomes connected to the next. The big surprising jumps sometimes is there, and it just reduces the attention span of the reader, but also it kind of questions the quality of the work that we do. And it's not something that, it happens all the time, even with the best of us. It's just because what you have in your mind and bring it to the paper, you kind of think you know what you've talked about, but you always need an objective view to read it from the A to Z to understand whether the story flows. So transition words are really, or transition phrases, they can be very, very useful when we're writing academically. So that was what I wanted to say about the first question, what is academic writing? If there is no questions here, I can move to the next one.
May I come in, madam?
Oh, sorry, you are breaking up.
I have one question.
Yes, Sumita.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I just want to have more clarity about hedging statement.
Yeah. All right. So, like I said, for example, let's bring you back to this year, COVID year. different countries adopted different governments have adopted different strategies to respond to COVID situation, to the pandemic situation, right? And different countries, of course, they achieved different outcomes. Now, one researcher might just decide to look at the amount of money that the government of countries, certain countries, pump into the society, and then they see what did that money do, okay? So an economist can only look at those kind of effectiveness of policy analysis and things like that. But as an economist, we don't understand other factors such as medical factors, public health factors, not quite a lot. So based on what we look at and what we examine, we may come up with a decision that this particular policy did help, for example, Australian economy to get out of the recession. So therefore, in every situation, all the countries in the world should follow Australian approach to COVID pandemic, right? That is an absolute recommendation. So we have to do this so we can get a good result. But remember, anything, it's so interrelated to so many different factors. So Australia, for example, in terms of population, it's not a very huge country compared to countries like India or America or China, right? In terms of geographic locations, climate, cultural, access to public health, every country has a different profile, right? So if we focus on one aspect and then our conclusion, we put forward our conclusion as an absolute statement, that is incorrect. That is very kind of close-minded approach to academic writing. What you can say is that it appears that, instead of saying, no, this is definitely a solution, you can say, it appears that fiscal policies in countries similar, in countries that have similar economic profile with Australia can work in that regard, so reduce the impact of financial pressure from COVID-19 situation, something like that. So you are not actually saying my way is the correct conclusion, so it has to be replicated. But actually, you are a little using hedging a statement. You say it appears that, it may be, you know.
Very got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Samita. Well, the next question was, very good question, actually. How to choose a research topic? That is definitely something we all are quite involved with. As researchers, we are expected to produce research, right? We have to publish. But how do we choose a research topic? First of all, as researchers, we have to start developing a skill or ability.
Hello, am I audible?
To understand what is a good research topic. So the good news is that we can learn those kind of skills, and there are some guidelines around them. The not so very good news is that we all have to get there anyway, sooner or later. We have to understand what are the good research topics. Sometimes a research topic is given to us. So for example, as a PhD student, sometimes you propose a topic, or your supervisor come up with something, or there are research projects that they have funding. So the question around that research topic is completely clear, so that's no problem. But what about other times when academics want to sit down and start writing something that can be also not only a publication, but can also help them to start building a track record around their field. So what are the things that we can do in order to develop a good research topic? Very easy. Yes. Sorry.
Sorry. Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Shalaka?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, actually, I think my mic wasn't working. So I had a question related to the first one which we covered. So should I go ahead, or you want me to ask it later?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask that, could you suggest a couple of tools or softwares which we could use while we are using the academic writing, so that all the rules which we are using, it would be easier for us to follow them?
Yes, good question. But I've worked with a few, and I can't really say. At the end of the day, a software is a machine. It's not going to be really taking your brain role. It's not going to be the main driver. There are a few, like one is Grammarly, one is writing aid. I think I can share a few softwares with you later. So one is Grammarly, I think one is called Writing Aid, and of course you have to purchase these softwares are not for free. However, what I have noticed with these softwares is that they can pick up your obvious mistakes. They can pick up some obvious errors, and they can provide you with some suggestions and recommendations, but that's the extent of it. So at the end of the day, is our brain which is the main driver of that piece of writing. So yes, we can definitely use word editorial softwares, but there will be nowhere close to a perfect academic writing. So we can't really rely on machines to convey our thoughts. What you can do, you can use those machines to just double check some of the obvious potentials that you can work on. But yeah, unfortunately, at the end of the day, we have to do all the monitoring and cross-examining of the writing and things like that. But I will be happy to share some of the softwares names that I know, but you can also Google and see what are the best 5 maybe top softwares, editorial softwares that can help you. At the end of the day, I find that a human can do a better editing work than a machine. Right, so how do we choose a topic? First of all, I would say brainstorming. It's very good, like us getting together, having meetings over coffee, over Zoom, doesn't matter. When you are in your area, in your circle of academic intellects around you, start talking about your research interest and see. And I basically work multidisciplinary. I really love working with other disciplinary areas, and most of my works are interdisciplinary. And how I come up with ideas or I become part of an idea is basically based on conversations, a lot of conversations, and when people talk about their passion. And that's not in the list. The passion is not in the list, but it's really important. Of course, a topic that you want to work with should be in your interest. You should really like it. Of course, that's the first thing. But that's, I assume we already know that. So so brainstorming firstly. The other very important technical step that you can take is immersing yourself in the literature. Reading, and more reading. And the more you read, the more you understand what are your areas of your interest, but also you start understanding where's the gap. Is there something that I actually can do to close a gap? So that's really important. Also remember, if you are trying to find a topic to write a paper or a thesis, you need to define how narrow your focus should be. Okay, so we cannot solve all the world's problem in one thesis or in one paper. Remember that. So it has to be very, very narrowly focused on one particular question, right? So make sure your focus is narrow. Be flexible. Flexibility is really important. So for example, I wake up and I decide that I really want to do something in the area of sustainability that concerns cultural aspect as well as traditional method and so forth. I'm just making up as I'm talking, by the way, so it's not a real topic. And I said, I really want to do that. So what do I do about it? And then I start really immersing myself in the literature. And I realized, oh my goodness, my idea is not as novel as I thought. It's been already done. So sometimes you realize the work has been done. So there is no particular gap in the literature or that idea is not original anymore. So be flexible and accepting of the fact that that may not work. So change your position. So try another topic. A lot of, for example, PhD students start with one proposal and they expect to stick with that proposal until the end of PhD. But most of us, and we remember still from our days, and most of PhD students that you talk to them, they usually get to change their topic one way or another, or slightly sometimes in major way, because as you immerse yourself in the literature, you learn a lot. And you see something is feasible, I cannot actually work on this, the data is not going to be available, or this idea is not original anymore. So you be flexible and be prepared to change the topic if it's not going to work for you. Stay current is very important. So for example, 2020 has been the year of emergence of post-COVID and during COVID publications. You see already the market is flooded. I remember even 2 or 3 months after the COVID started, there was a book published already. The COVID, I think it was in the energy field. And they were already planning for post-COVID era for the sources of renewable energy and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that was fast track. So people pick up the current issues that is relevant and start working on them. So I would say, yes, stay current. Before COVID, a lot of work in different disciplines were around climate change, natural disasters, right? Sustainability goals, all those things that they are pressing issues of our time. So stay current. So you don't want to start looking at a research topic that was important 20 years ago, but not anymore, even though you really like it. But if there is no area of research gap that you can address, or if that problem is not anymore current, what's the point of doing that? And then try to define, when you find your topic, the first thing that you do is try to turn that topic into a research question. And I'm just going to stop there about finding a research topic. So this is just like where you actually start putting a research proposal together. I'm not going to really talk about research proposal today. That will take another 2 hours. But that's how, at least mentally, you prepare yourself into finding a topic, and right after you find a topic, you start putting a proposal together. So these are some suggestions that you can follow, practical, I would say, suggestions you can follow to choose a good research topic. Was there any question on this one? Okay. Moving on, there was another good one, how to search. And I'm very pleased to see these questions, even though these questions seem very basic, but if we don't get the basic right, doesn't matter how much we write or how well we write, still the basic is the fundamental elements of the research are not looked after. So I'm very, very happy to see that special attentions are being paid to the quality of the work that we do. So the questions are showing me the people who are wondering about how can I produce a good quality research work. So this is really good. How to search. Basically, the question is about search sources. I think reliable search sources. And that's a very good question. This is a digital era. Everything that we find, we don't even read books anymore, unfortunately, because all the books are digitally published. There are e-books around, articles, libraries have access to all the journals in digital format. So yeah, so internet is becoming the very primary source, not the only source, but the primary source of our searches. How can we rely the information for our academic writing? So remember, for academics, there are two sources that we can basically distinguish. One is the scholarly sources and one is non-scholarly sources. I'll talk about the scholarly sources first. So these are the things that you see on the screen are all scholarly sources that you can use in your research books, academic articles. However, I have to say something about academic articles. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure you have heard the term or the phrase predatory publications, predatory journals, right? So we know that there are journals and publishers out there that they are not recognized as quality platforms. So we have to also be careful about, if we read a journal paper, is it coming really from a reputable publisher with good impact measures and stuff like that? Can we actually rely on the peer review process of those academic articles? Because, you know, peer review is very important in academia. So even with academic articles, you have to be choosy and careful. Academic conference proceedings that they are published, they are also scholarly sources. The same argument goes for them. There are some conferences that they're not so reputable, again, because there is no proper peer review process. But they are generally considered as scholarly sources. Governments, departments, all of the government departments frequently publish reports. Lots of businesses and industries publish reports. Those reports are scholarly, even though we call them gray literature. We call them gray literature because they are not peer-reviewed, but they are still reliable because experts are producing those technical reports. Legislations, of course, it's important. We can always refer to them because they are proven, they are recorded, and experts have came up with them, so they are reliable sources. And archives, library archives, different types. Again, you have to be careful of what archives we're talking about, but these all can be parts of scholarly sources. So if you're searching on the internet, remember these categories are the good categories for you to make a reference to in your work. But there are also non-scholarly sources. What are those non-scholarly sources? News sources, magazines, newspapers, articles or materials on the website that they keep updated frequently. So for example, there might be a website about COVID information, right? COVID information, and then they keep updating those COVID information or COVID responses. It's just a website that gets updated. So you can't really make a reference to them. So be clear. I'm not saying nobody does. I'm just saying be careful. These are not scholarly sources. So if you want to make a reference to them, you have to have that in mind, that what you are using in your academic writing. Advocacy materials and opinion-based materials on internet. There might be lots of different groups talking about, I don't know, for example, animal rights, environment, climate change, all very valid, important issues. But what the advocacy group is putting up on the net, is that something that you want to make a reference to in your academic writing? Probably not, unless you are doing a research around advocacy groups. But what I'm saying is that just be careful, these sources are not scholarly sources. Doesn't mean that we never use them, but rarely, really rarely. There are sources on the internet that they don't have references to other sources. That means somebody has written it without paying attention to other people's or other works' opinions. So be very careful about using those sources. Trade and professional sources magazines. So all the commercial magazines that we get to read for different purposes, there might be trade, business, or even, you know, just entertainment magazines. Those are non-scholarly sources. Book reviews and plays, they can be scholarly if they actually have, if they have been created and curated around a research topic, but usually if there is no reference to other work, if it's not part of a research project, then those are non-scholarly sources. So when you're searching on the internet, I would say just be mindful what is generally accepted and what is generally not accepted. All right, but there are also data that we collect these days. Some of the data we collect from internet, some from other sources. I just thought, before I talk about the sources of data, because I think it was part of kind of the question as well, I just want to show you this. I'm sure everybody is aware of this. The type of data that we use for our research can be one of the two categories. Sometimes it's a mix, but basically, essentially, the data is either quantitative or is qualitative, right? So the quantitative data is those data that you can quantify. So it's measurable. And because they are measurable, they are numeric. So they have numbers attached to them as a value. They have a number attached to them. The qualitative data, they are essentially non-numeric. All right, so with quantitative data, let's say anything that you want, again, I'm going back to some of the economics of business concept in my head. Quantitative data like GDP levels, salary levels for businesses, for example, how many, for the shops, for example, in the field of marketing, how many customers walked in during busy hours, or with the transport system, how much is the level of investment in transport? So all of these answers have some value, numerical value attached to them. But then when it's coming to qualitative data, they are inherently non-numeric. That means we talk about qualities, okay? So quality, like frustration, resilience, transformation, color of something, green, red, all these things are quality. They're describing a quality, right? They can be a word, they can be a sentence, but they're quality. We don't actually measure them with numbers. But there is a part of qualitative data that can be numeric, and that's when we actually give them a numeric code, and that's not, again, for today's discussion. We can talk about this data and issues around it in another session, but sometimes we can give our qualitative characteristics or qualities a numeric code so we can analyze them better. But anyway, so when you know that the type of data that you're dealing with is either quantitative or qualitative, then that information can help us to understand what are the sources of data collection. Again, very quickly, I'm going to go through this. But again, please, if you have any question about any of this, stop me. As researchers, we can look at documents and archives just to collect our data. And there are so many different techniques around analyzing documents. So the documents itself, whether it's academic publication or it's gray literature or it's a report, whatever that is, it can actually act as your data. But you have to just follow an appropriate way of analyzing those. But documents and archive can be your sources of data. We just talked about quantitative data. So any maybe website that you go and they offer you measures around variables, those can be your quantitative data. The first thing comes to my mind is bureaus of statistics in every country, Department of Statistics in every country, or different association, economic associations, government supported website that they provide lots of national statistics, national accounting, all different sources that they deal with quantitative data. So quantitative data can be actually in many cases that they can be sourced through internet or going actually to actual archives of those quantitative variables. So that's another source. Interviews are very popular for researchers who are dealing with people. Of course, the focus of attention is the subject of your thesis or your research is people, cultural issues, societal issues, consumer marketing issues, consumer behavior issues, anything like that you have to deal with people and people's perception, perhaps. Social sciences mainly are concerned with questions that can be answered through interviews. And there are different types of interviews. There are open-ended questions, standardized interviews, general interviews, fixed response interviews. There are a variety of ways that you can control the flow of your data collection procedure. Like I said, I'm not really unpacking any of this in details unless there are questions, but we can discuss that in future sessions. There are two types of observations that can also help you collect data. One is a direct observation and one is participant observation. Again, in marketing field, in psychology, in social sciences in general, it's very popular. In the direct observation, you just look at the interaction of your subjects. By subjects, I mean people that they are in your sample. You just look at them and basically see what is happening based on a scenario that you set. With the participant observation, you also become a participant in the process, become part of the group, and then interact with the group and then observe what's happening. And the last one is a last source of data collection. It can be artifacts and visual materials. So maybe not very popular in business fields, marketing, management, HR, or economics, but certainly in some aspects of social sciences. Looking at artifacts, and artifacts are not necessarily ancient relics. They can be, but they're not necessarily that. Artifacts is anything that humans produce. Okay, it can be a chair, it can be a piece of furniture, it can be a piece of art, it can be technology, it can be a book. You just investigate them as a researcher. So you can investigate artifacts and visual materials. That's another source that you collect your information. Now, some of this information can come from internet and some of them actually requires you to do a field trip. So field trip. So that's what I wanted to say about the sources of search and also sources of gathering data.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, actually, I have two questions.
Yes.
One is related to collection of primary data. Many a times when we are searching, we find certain reports which have been published, maybe statistical reports which have been published by some of the organizations. So maybe
Yes.
World Health Organization, but at
Yes.
least WHO is known, so we know it's a reliable source. But there could be millions of other such organizations who have a global report, statistical report, which could be of our use. So do we rely on them, or how do we actually find out? This is the first question.
Yes. Did you want to continue, or do you want me to answer that first?
Yeah, like if you want, I can go with other, or
okay,
like,
so maybe I tell you first before I forget the whole of the question. Yes.
Okay.
So again, yes, there might be thousands of businesses out there that they produce report, and you are quite right to question that. Can I use all of that? I would say always be careful and cautious about the source. If you are dealing with governmental departments, yes, I would say reliable. If you are dealing with reputable international organization like WHO, United Nations, or the working parties that they work with, for example, United Nations or other reputable governments, yes, experts that they actually provide those reports is still reliable. If you think a small business somewhere in the world that is not very reputable, but they're saying something that you want to use, be a little bit careful and do a little research about the reputation of source. So there is not one, like I wouldn't say there is a recipe that I can give you as a black and white recipe that exactly follow that. But I would say always exercise your judgment based on the validity and the credibility of the source. Some of them are easy to judge. Some of them are, yes, I would accept that. But if, for example, you are aware of some conflict of, you are aware of some debates maybe going around the reputation of some certain reports or data sources, I would caution you of using that, but you can sometimes still use it and say, it depends what you want to do with that piece of information. Sometimes you're doing a critical review, so you can actually put that as part of your critical review and say some of the sources are not reliable and some are. But if you want to use it as a data and you're aware of the fact that there might be some debates around the credibility, for example, one certain journals, we know like the list of predatory journals have been published. They are being published, I think, every year. There are thousands and thousands of, so if you have good evidence of a certain publisher that they're providing documents and that publisher is not very reputable, you definitely don't use it. But if you have suspicions, I would still be careful of using their data. So yes, you still have to exercise some level of judgment.
Okay, thank you so much. And second thing which I wanted to ask is, like, once we collect the primary data, as an early researcher, the one issue which we normally face is that we find so many papers, and we think that most of the information in many of these papers, we find it relevant to our research. So then narrowing down the papers and precisely taking only what is required from that paper and putting it in our research, this proves to be a challenge as an early researcher. So can you just guide on how exactly we could use this information to get relevant output generated from this research papers which we have downloaded?
Yes, so your question is about literature, basically. So much literature.
Correct.
And you don't know what to report on. Okay.
Correct.
Again, yes. Again, I think you still have to exercise some level of judgment. But I would say have a good balance between different areas. First of all, let's say the literature is coming from one field. So I'm even not considering some literature can be coming from multiple fields. Okay, so maybe I'm not talking about interdisciplinary research. I'm talking about discipline-specific research. Okay, so all the literature you're talking about is focused in one field. So you don't have to actually weed out different disciplinary areas. with that case scenario, I would say try to create a balance between the years of publication. Okay, some of them may go back to 1970s, for example, and some of them in 2019, 2018, 2020. It shouldn't be like that, that you only focus on all the studies all the time or only the most recent studies. Because whoever wants to read your research, they want to see what has happened over time, how the literature has evolved over time, right? So some ideas may originated 50 years ago and there are good literatures around them. Yes, please use them. Some of the theoretical foundation we still use, they date back several decades, but then start looking at different time points and see what kind of literature you get during those times up to recent times. So one rule is to have a good balance of literature over time. The other rule that I would say is look at the source that publishes those articles. Are all those sources reputable? So weed out the sources that may be a little bit questionable. You still may have 300, 400 articles and you don't know what to write about them. Then what? Then start fleshing out the articles that they have something novel and new to say, because you probably will have 50 articles saying the same thing, right? If that is the case, then you don't have to report all 50. You probably can find the top five from a certain argument and say, by the way, this study A1, A, B, C, D, E, F are discussing this issue this way. So then categorize different categories of articles and try to come up and narrow down and narrow down and narrow down. You have a research question, right? That's another good indicator. Which articles are trying to actually, they link better with your research questions, right? So you have to go through several filtering process, because I do understand what you're saying. There's so much, it's an ocean of literature out there. Which one do we report? Just remember balance in everything. So for example, one person, okay, I'm going back to economics again. So we have, for example, two major school of thoughts in economics. One is classical, you might have heard that, and one is Keynesians, for example, you might have heard of as them as well. So, and I'm a post-Keynesian economist, so I believe in certain school of thoughts and principles. But when I am writing a paper about those historical thoughts, if all the articles that I review is from post-Keynesian domain, then I'm being biased because I'm actually removing and excluding all these other school of thoughts ideas, right? So even though I know where I come from, where my ideology, research ideology sits, still I need to be fair to reflect most important literature out there. So a number of filtering stages and number of mechanisms in place for you to make a balanced judgment of what to say. And of course, if you are writing a paper for a journal that doesn't accept more than 7,000 words, of course, you have to be very, very brutal in shortening the literature review section. I would say go with the most important one that influences your research then. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. That was wonderfully put up.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, two questions, very good questions. And I kind of thought I have to, again, put them together under one category. The question is asking about, the first one is avoiding plagiarism. Oh, wow, that's a very good question. I'm so happy that this has been discussed because it's such a gray area, plagiarism, and it's so important to avoid it. So let's get to that. But also there's a question about referencing and references. Of course, I'm not going to talk about the style of referencing. We all know there are different styles like APA style, MLA style, or Chicago style of referencing. So that depends on what publisher wants to publish your work or what your university is recommending about the style of referencing. So that's a different story. But what I think these questions are asking here is about the concept of academic integrity, which is absolutely critical. So if we don't follow with academic integrity, whatever we write is not going to have any sort of value, not in your current job, not for the future job, not in terms of the reputations that we want to develop in our field. So academic integrity is very, very important thing. And most of the countries, if not all countries, but I would say most of the countries and almost all of the universities around the world should, and I think they do have a code for responsible research. Okay, so there should be a code, a guideline around what do we mean by integrity and what do we mean by a responsible research. Here, I want to show you the Australian code for the responsible conduct of research. Please feel free to search for similar topic in Indian context or maybe within your universities. I'm sure that universities have their own code of conduct for responsible research, and usually those codes come from national direction. So do a little search into your own context and see what is out there. Australian code for the responsible conduct of research is actually a national document, but then it's dictated to all the universities across Australia, and all the universities have to follow, and the researchers have to follow this code. And this code has 10 principles. So let us go quickly through them. The first code, P1 on top, is honesty. So it's basically saying that you have to be honest from the moment that you start developing your idea in terms of research, the moment you start collecting data, and when you report your findings. So from the beginning to the end, honesty of the researcher is very important. You have to present data in truthful manner, right? So honesty. Then the second one is rigor. So the rigor is basically talking about following the research designs and the protocols and rules of research very, very closely. Technical analysis, conceptual analysis, everything, just follow the rules. So the quality and the accuracy of your research is kind of guaranteed. So that's principle 2. Principle 3 is transparency. Again, similar to honesty, right? Transparency and honesty is basically saying that sometimes we do have conflict of interest. We have to basically acknowledge that if there is a conflict of interest, especially in project and project reports. Sometimes some researchers may hide some of their data. So it's not actually offered upon request what kind of data has resulted in such findings. So we have to be honest. And actually in Australia, there are systems of storing our data, and a lot of journals around the world ask you now these days to deposit your data with your paper, even though your data may not be published with the paper, but the data is deposited into the journal's database. So it's just all those issues with the integrity of your research. And if somebody wanted to, for example, audit those data, they can access it. So transparency and honesty are very close, even though there are 3 principles, but 2 different principles, but they're very close. Fairness is really important. First, fairness can be interpreted in 2 different ways, and should be actually. One is fairness towards the others who are involved in your work, in your research work. So that's one, being fair to all the researchers in the group in a way that you have to acknowledge their contribution in one way or another. Can include authorship rights and all that I'm very happy to talk about authorship rights as well. But also fairness about all the other sources that you use in your research. So that brings us back to the issue of referencing, right? So if you're using anyone's work, make sure we reference them, we appropriately attribute the work to those original work. So that's fairness. Again, the reason for it is because it's relevant to the referencing aspect. Respect, basically respecting of not only your team members, but also respecting of the academic researching community, right? Even though we may end up rejecting someone else's work academically for these reasons. For example, these results, you want to kind of debate accuracy of some results or findings, you still have to be quite respectful in the academic community when you're addressing works of others. Recognition, it's very important. Again, all of these are very, very interrelated. Recognition goes back to referencing. If sometimes maybe you're not actually referencing a certain person's work, but maybe that person or an organization has been really helpful in your journey to get your data, for example. Or for example, you wanted to go to a remote area, for example, in India, to investigate or question or interview some of the village people for a certain social or environmental question. And getting to those areas were very difficult, right? But you found a guide, for example, or someone who actually helped you throughout the way, helped you with lots of local information, facilitated your work. So of course, this person may not get an authorship right in your paper, but you can recognize them by saying that, like, a special thank goes to this. Sometimes the recognition means if you get funding for your paper, for your project, and then you publish a paper out of that project, you acknowledge that funding just in the form of acknowledgement. So recognition. But again, recognition is very connected to fairness and respect, isn't it? So they're all similar. And then accountability, which is really important. And that's basically is whatever we write and we publish, whatever you publish, we have to be accountable for, right? So be very, very careful what you send out, what you publish. Make sure that you follow all the rules of research, good research design, reliable sources of literature, reliable sources of data, because what you put out under your name, you will be accountable for. And there will be so many different audits, informal or formal, or even some other researchers can just look at it and find out that might be something wrong with the design, or then you should be accountable for, and you will be accountable for. So be careful from the very early stages of your work development. Be careful that in every step of the way you follow exact rules and suggestions and proper research design. Promotion. Promotion is a very good one as well, because basically what promotion says is that whatever we learn, we have to teach others, right? So especially when it comes to this code of conduct. Now, I'm aware of this code, so I have to actually promote it amongst my PhD students, amongst other colleagues in different research forums, including this one today we're meeting. So I'm promoting academic integrity, and we're talking about the responsible conduct of research. And then when we finish today's session, each of you become an ambassador of responsible research, and then you go back to your own network and then you promote it. So you promote responsible research, and that's how over time we will end up with a bunch of quality research. Yes, I see a hands up. Prasad, you have a question?
Dr.
Yes.
Prasad Pathak here. Good afternoon,
Hello,
madam.
Doctor. Hello, Doctor.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. My question is related with code of responsible research only. My concern is how to develop a good team.
Yeah.
I'm considering more than one individuals working together on the same project. How to develop a good team for improvising research contribution by following this code of responsible research.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Prasad. Actually, I do have that question to answer. If you bear with me 1 or 2 minutes, I will get to that slide about the team and how to make sure that we are following the principles. Do you like to bear with me just 2 minutes, because I think the next topic the next question is going to be very close to what you just asked. Okay, so after this responsible research, let's go back to that keyword in that question, which was about plagiarism. How to avoid plagiarism. If you want to look at the definition of plagiarize or to plagiarize in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, this is what we get: to steal and pass off someone else's work as our own work. Yeah, of course, we don't do that. Stealing, that would be very obvious, stealing someone else's work. But plagiarism is not that simple. To use someone's work, even as short as one sentence, without crediting the source, without actually saying who said that sentence. To commit literary theft, that would be probably very obvious as well. We just take someone else's work and say, this is based on dictionary definition, by the way. To present as new and original an idea or product derived from an existing source. So there might have been a source maybe a decades ago, or maybe from some other part of the world that is not very well connected, and we know the idea, and then we start using that as a new idea. And that's why I said immersing yourself in literature is very important, because then you exactly understand what literature already has covered and what hasn't covered. So even that, so getting someone's new idea and present it as our own new idea when the idea has already been created, that would be plagiarism. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud, and it is an act of fraud. It involves both stealing but also lying about it. So it's stealing and lying. And look, none of us, I can promise you that, none of us want to do any of that, right? We never consciously do any of that. But unfortunately, sometimes because we don't pay enough attention to appropriate referencing and those kind of responsible research, we unintentionally commit plagiarism. So that is very important for us to understand, that any of these are examples of plagiarism, unintentionally sometimes, but it still will be considered as plagiarism. So the first one is just getting someone else's as your own work, which is more applicable in university with the students. That happens a lot. Again, inadvertently or sometimes unintentional. Not giving credits, but sometimes even you put a direct quote from someone, but do not put that direct quote on a quotation mark. Even that can be considered as plagiarism, because if you are using word for word of a sentence, then you have to put in a quotation mark. So APA referencing style, MLA referencing style, again, learning those techniques are very important. But also remember, if somebody else's work, just report it. Sometimes the students or PhD students sometimes think that if my work is heavily referenced, then it shows I haven't done much, which is completely a wrong perception, because the heavier you reference, the more citations you use, the more credible your piece of writing becomes. So that's one part. And before I jump onto the team, there is one more topic that I want to cover under plagiarism. I don't know how many of you have heard the phrase self-plagiarism. Have you heard of by the show of hand? Just show me. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Self-plagiarism or self-stealer. And you think that may sound ridiculous. How can I steal from myself? Yes, Sumita. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for confirming that. That's when the writer borrows generously from their own previously published work. Right? It doesn't mean you cannot cite your work. Yeah, you published a work in 2012. Now you're writing something again about it. So you can definitely cite your own work, make a reference to it, say a sentence, because it's part of a literature, it's been published. But if you generously copy paste from your own work without even attribute, even though it's your own writing, but you don't actually properly attribute your published work, then that is called self-plagiarism. And that's mainly because Sorry, my cat is making a lot of distractions here, and I'm trying to get him to stop making a lot of noise here. So even that is not allowed, right? So you can make a reference to your own work, but so give credit to your work that you have published before. But if you don't, and then generously, especially if you generously use same argument over and over in different publication, that is what we call multiple production or salami publications. You see, we have a slice of salami and we start slicing it thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. It's the same salami, but we just keep producing it multiple times. Sorry, Sumita, did you have a question? I see your hands up, Sumita.
No, I don't have any question right now. I raised it when you asked about
Oh, yes,
self-plagiarism.
yes, sorry.
I'm not, yeah.
That's good.
But I'm not able to lower my hand. So that's why.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. No, that's good. I just asked you. I think if you click on it again, it should bring it up, should bring it down, but it doesn't matter.
It's not happening, unfortunately.
That's all right. Now I know you don't have a question. Now I know you don't have a question. There are a few questions here that I want to actually go back to Prasad's question first, then I'll come back to the research design question. So let me click forward a quick few times. Right. Let me answer teams and teamwork first, and then I'll go back to research design if you like, because that question was still fresh. So yes, there was a question on top of Prasad's question, how to develop a good team for improvising, improvising research contribution. And that's a very good question because we all do collaborative work. Sometimes we write solo, and that's, I think, also is important for researchers to write also solo, because it just reflects exactly what your trace of thoughts are. But more than often our works is collaborative, is in collaboration with others. So how do we make sure that we have a good research team that can help us to produce quality research? There are a few things that we have to expect from the team members. A collective commitment to goals of the project, also individual commitment to the goals of the project, but also there are operational and management issues that I will discuss. So for example, when I form a research team, first of all, you really have to ask people to be in your team who they really want to be there. It's very important for them to want to be part of that research project. Remember when we talk about research topic, how to choose a good research topic, I said you have to have a passion for it. It's the same thing. So if you want to get a contribution from your research team, you have to have people who are like-minded, or they're at least willing to explore new avenues together. So for me, when I am forming a research team, I tell my team that, there are collective commitment that it is expected. We all will try to expand our projects. So sometimes it's one project, sometimes it's multiple projects, sometimes it's one project with multiple subject research questions. So I say we always have the intention to expand them in the future. So we don't want to just do that and then finish. So it's something that is happening over time. I would like to see that some of you bring in new project ideas to the work. So everybody has, everybody flourishes with new idea and contribute more. I would set a goal for publication. Of course, we do want to publish as researchers. If we don't publish, nobody knows what we're thinking. Nobody knows what we're good at, right? So I would say that this is my expectations to publish, but also sometimes these expectations to engage with media. So media can be, sometimes when you publish something really good or relevant, media comes to you. They want to interview you. So they want to, talk to you about certain things, radios, newspapers and all that, but that's not necessary. If you can engage with media, if not, that's fine. We like these days to engage with industry, right? Because there is this idea and a lot of talk out there about research with impact. You have heard that, research with impact. Okay, so there might be plenty of great research ideas out there that as a researcher we can do, but what is the impact of that research? Is that research going to solve any real world problem? So there is an expectation, for example, to engage with the relevant industry, any industry that you are kind of linked in or synchronized with. It might be in the marketing, for example, field. It might be in a small, medium enterprises. It can be anything. It can be engineering field. So engage with the proper industry people, and so kind of create some sort of partnership. And of course, one of the other expectation is that I want them to publish, disseminate your finding. Again, you want to give your team an exposure. You want to let everybody knows that how well we are working together, and these are our publications. So I encourage them to go for publications of, you know, conferences, public forums, public lectures and stuff like that, and promote the research. And one of the other things that I always am up for is that to encourage a teamwork in a way that at the end of the project or during the life of project, we can go and apply for a recognition award. There are so many awards around. Usually within your own university, there are different schemes of recognition in research award. So I would say, you know, apply for those recognition awards. But also another expectation, and is not always successful, but another expectation is that the research team members constantly work, apply for potential funding, either internally from your own university or externally. It just increases the profile of your research team. So these are the commitments that collectively the team should kind of commit to. I mean, you can use them as your own point of references, or you can come up with your own goals. Those were quite personal to me, to my experience. In terms of commitment to the projects, I do run a flagship project that is an umbrella project and already has 10 nested projects under it, and more projects are getting added. So that's why you see the word flagship there. But basically, I'm talking about the project. It can be one project. It doesn't have to be multiple. Again, very similarly, individually, I would ask each member to be mindful about expanding their projects, be very careful about, be creative, not careful, be creative about providing new ideas, again, publication, engagement, and very similar. So, but for the question that was asked before, how do we kind of stay on top of our game, basically, right? So the expectation are very similar for individuals and for the groups, but whoever is leading their project is basically in charge of making sure people individual goals as well as the group collective goals are progressing. And that goes for academic integrity as well. One way, for example, is to have, let me see. Yes. One way is to have communication channels open all the time with your team members, right? So you can come up with frequent meetings, and in meetings, expect the members to report on their progress. And then in those meetings or even emails, you can ask for evidence. For example, of somebody says, I've collected the data from these sources. Can you share with us the sources of the data? So somebody can go and double check the sources of the data. Or if a team member wants to publish a paper, make sure that paper is going to be published in a good journal, in a reputable journal. So a lot of communication, and even as much as when you start a team, you start communicating with the team the responsible research principles. Just say, these are our expectations, and just like kind of providing them mentoring opportunity and training opportunity constantly, all the time. Mentoring is very important. And the mentor doesn't need to be necessarily a professor. We don't have to necessarily ask anyone who has a knowledge and expertise and well published, and a good researcher can provide those mentorship. And mentorships can be pitched at different levels. Different levels of mentorship can be available. The other thing is that in terms of team management of the team, make sure you celebrate success. So if somebody from the team is, publishing a piece or being interviewed by a local radio channel, or they publish a book chapter, just celebrate his success, whether it's an individual success within the team or the whole team. But more than anything else, the group dynamic is very important. Group climate, right? Like I said, you bring the people to work together who you think they have a passion for your topic, for that topic. They want to actually be part of that. If they don't want to, you will not get contribution out of them. And B, they work well together, because there can be always, with the teams, there's always a chance of getting a toxic person who is counterproductive, is not really working with the team expectations and deadlines and all that. So getting the climate right is important. Now, sometimes we are lucky, we get the climate right the first go. Some other times, no, sometimes we do end up with people who are not a team player. And I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. What do we do with them, basically? So that's that. And then publication matters. Again, publication as a researcher matters. So how to stay on the top of the game as a team, that's the case. Make sure that you publish in good places. And as a team leader, as the, for example, first author of a paper, the person is responsible to make sure the teams have access to resources. Now, by resources, I don't mean money, not necessarily, but maybe library resources. Everybody has, I don't know, appropriate account with university or whatever resources is available with you, for you. So to make sure that your team members have appropriate level of access to those resources, so you can push agenda forward and push the meeting, the goals of the team forward. And training is really important. So you establish a team of 6-7 people, some of whom you have worked with in the past, and some of whom you're still starting to work with each other. And they may be at different levels. Some PhD students might be in your team, some professors. Ask your team, what do they need in terms of training? What do they really need? And then when you identify the need in terms of training needs, okay, somebody may need a statistical knowledge to work with, I don't know, a software. Somebody may need a little help with literature review. Somebody may need understanding the credible sources of internet search. So just list the need of people, because we are very likely to make mistakes if we don't know something, right? So if you actually ask their needs for training and then provide those kind of training to them, and I can promise you can provide those kind of training for free sometimes. So it doesn't have to be you searching for someone who can work for free, because it's a group. Remember, the group has its amazing advantage to them, because everybody is good at something. You just can utilize those different resources from within the group for free to provide certain training. So keep the communication open, understand the need of your team, and then expect from them. So expectations, not only support, but also expectations. Expectations are those commitments that we just talked about in the previous slide. I think, let me see. Yeah, okay. Operations and management of the team. Like I said, frequent meetings, like in the time of hardship, like now you can do Zoom. But the good thing about Zoom and technology is that now you can meet with me in Australia, you can meet with someone in America. So it's actually good use of technology. It doesn't have to be always in person. So flexibility is important. One of the things that I'm very kind of I want to say restrict to follow is that I ask that, and it's not only me, it's a lot of team leaders who do that, to maintain a membership of certain group or to maintain authorship right. Contribution is essential. Okay, so you have to expect contribution from your team members. It can be, it doesn't mean that we want to burn them out with a lot of responsibility. But for example, if the team is writing a paper that is going to be submitted to a conference 6 months from now, then you have to come up with a system somehow that everybody carry their own weight and put in their own, you know, contribution and write the paper together. However, my own practice is that the first author, because they get the main credit, not all of it, but the first author is the author that does the majority of work. But for the remaining of the work, everybody else has to come in and chip in. Again, there are different styles of managing these things, but I think, again, for me, it's important that contributions are looked at as essential for being part of something. That will help you to kind of get rid of free riders in the team. Frequent report on progress, that's another way of managing team's contribution. So maybe if you have a monthly meeting or bi-monthly meeting, in that meeting everybody reports even 1 minute, only 1 minute or 2 minutes on the progress, what I have been doing in the last couple months. And sometimes when the team actually is very well on the way of their goals, you don't even need those reports, because suddenly somebody is writing this abstract and another one is writing that paper. In the team, somebody is writing grant application. So those are output, those are measurable outputs that you can see. So you know the team is working. And tracking real progress is another one. If you're new with the team and team basically management, I think there are so many software out there that they can help you with monitoring the progress. Asana, I think, is one of them. It depends what your university is using. I think Microsoft My Team, I think it's very popular in universities. So you can basically create your own team project and have like a Gantt chart, you know, Gantt chart with deadlines and then members, and then each one, or maybe shared drives, even shared drives. Everybody can go to that spreadsheet and then type in their progress. So everybody can see everybody else's progress. So you can use technology to actually follow the progress of the real progress. And another one is that have an exit strategy. Exit strategy before you start a team, or when you start a team and you have your first communication with the team members, have an exit strategy. You can tell your team members that we understand life commitments, we understand, you know, things can happen at work and just kind of change direction of your focus and all that. So soon you feel that you cannot continue with the goals of this project, let us know. And so we can depart. We can part our ways, right? So we can part our ways. Have any type of exit strategies. Some exit strategies can be performance-based. So those are like more funded grants, huge grants that you get, and the deadlines are very tight and you have to report. So if a team member is not carrying their own weight, then you will be in trouble as a project leader, because there's like $1 million or $500,000 project in place on a stake, and then you have to manage it somehow. So you can have exit strategies based on performance, but in a smaller, more casual team setup, you just have an open conversation, honest conversation. If you think you can collaborate, that's fine, but you cannot be an author, for example, on this paper, or you don't have to be part of this project anymore. You feel free, and then you just part your ways very peacefully, very nicely, but at least an honest and open conversation is there. And also make sure that why in the first place you started that team. You had objectives in your mind. So you may change your objectives over time, that's fine, but just remember, don't lose focus on your objectives. And I think the last one here is that, oh no, actually, yeah. Nested projects. By what I mean by nested projects here, sometimes you have only one project that has a certain goals maybe certain timeline, 2 years, 1 year, and then that's it. And you know where you want to publish a conference paper out of it, you want to publish a journal paper out of it. Very clear, very nice, neat and easy. Sometimes the project is huge, or you see the potential in the project. That is not only one project, it can be multiple projects. Okay, so suddenly every team member can be a project leader of their own project under the main project. So those projects becomes like nested projects, right? But it's really good if you see a team member say, I really like to lead a small projects under this objective. Would you agree with that? I would always say yes, please, because it's such a good thing when your team members take initiative and start driving their own part of research under the main objective of the project, right? So it's very good because you're empowering them, but also you're teaching them research leadership, right? And
right.
Yes? Was there a question?
No, I said yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Sumita. Yeah, that's right. So empowering the team members are great because they will then become more productive, and then the team will benefit from that productivity. Yes, we always have a project leader, okay, because one leader needs to oversee everything, including those responsible research principles, right? So, but it doesn't mean that the project leader should do everything. Let people grow under your wing. And they start flourishing under your wing because it's going to be good for your project. And yes, and then credits. Credits is at the end of the, what do we do with the credits? I think you have to have a very clear strategy to who gets the credit. Of course, when you talk about the project as a whole, everybody should get the credit for the project. But maybe there are 4 papers are being written by your team members, and some of your team members are active on one paper and some of them on the other paper and all of, okay? So you have to have that discussion with your team. Again, depends what you believe in. For me, I would be saying that, okay, there might be 4 papers being written, but not everybody in the team is involved in every paper. So the credit or the authorship goes to people who write that paper, right? And the other people in the team may be doing something else. Maybe they're giving a presentation. So the presentation, then the credit of those presentation goes to those members. So I think to keep a team happy and productive is really important to recognize their work. Remember in that responsible code of responsible research, recognition was really important. So giving credit to whoever is doing the biggest part or any part of the project. Recognize people being recognized, you will motivate them to actually do better for your team, and they become their own kind of independent researchers, which at the end of the day will make your job easier. So empowering people and bringing best out of people, I think it will be beneficial to the entire team, not only one person. It's a collective win for everybody. So those were the things that I wanted to say about team, and a few slides. I'm sorry that I talked non-stop, but I'm happy to stop here and take some questions about teams, responsibilities, authorship, anything that you want to ask.
May I speak for a minute, ma'am?
Yes, please, Shilpa.
Yeah. We are really very happy to have this discussion today. Actually, it was so much of a good learning experience for all of us. And I'm really sorry that we had to take few more minutes out of your time today because
okay.
it got extended.
Yes.
And can I just make a request actually?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So can we keep the questions which would be asked by the faculties after today's interaction for the next session, and can we have some more?
May I request you one thing?
Sure.
6-7 questions are left from the list that you have got. So whenever you are free, I think that we should meet once again and those questions will be resolved. And thanks a lot for taking your time, and it was such a wonderful and interactive session. We learned a lot of things from you, and I'm sure that we will be in touch with you. But I would like to mention over here that in the next session, I would like to invite few faculties from different schools like School of Commerce and School of Liberal Arts. They are also very keen in the research work and they would like to participate in this kind of
Absolutely.
interaction.
Absolutely. The more the merrier. It's